Alright guys, so let me show you how I make my abstract backgrounds in After Effects. Make a new composition. Gonna make this 720 HD and 100 frames. Enter, make a new solid. Color doesn't matter. Go to Effects, generate four color gradient. And let's see, I usually use orange and blue, which works really great most of the time, so gonna make this sort of a orange and yellowish orange, something like that. We can always change these values, so don't worry too much about it for now. Gonna use a grayish blue, I don't know, something like that. Doesn't really matter that much now. Something like this. Looks kind of terrible, but it's gonna work for now, hopefully. Let's blend this more together. Up the blend value to something like 250, just so it's more blended together and it's not so much intersecting each other, the colors I mean. Alright, next step, make a new solid. I'm gonna make this one, go to your solid settings and make this one sort of like a dark grayish blue, something like that. This should work. Hit OK, and I'm gonna mask sort of like a border here. Use the pen tool for this. And I'm gonna go to mask options, go to feather, set this one the value to something like 250, should work. Set it to subtract. Now duplicate this layer by pressing Ctrl D and go to this layers, these new layers settings, and set it to make it completely black, and press T to show up the opacity options and set it to something like 70%. Now hit M to go to your mask options and set the expansion to, let's see, 130 should work. Alright, so next step, make a new solid. A lot of solids here, and go to noise and grain, fractional noise. So with this I'm gonna press F4 to show the mode, or just right click on the layer and you can go to blending mode. Set it to soft light. Soft light, is it? Yeah, I think, yeah, it should be soft light. Go to the fractional noise settings, set the contrast to 25, just so it's not so obtrusive, you know. And go to the layer settings, go hit T and just set the opacity to 70. You can always mess with these settings, but it's mainly the contrast you have to worry about. I'm gonna set this back to 25. So now to animate the noise, to make it more interesting, I'm gonna alt click on the evolution stopwatch, and this turns it into an expression, and just a really simple expression. You don't really have to know what it does, but just type time multiplied by 250, so something like this. So what it does is just animates the noise. Just basically that's all it does. And I'm gonna go to the transform tab over here in the noise, and I'm gonna make this a little bigger, just so it's not really so much detail going on. So 150 for the scale, and this is what we have so far. So now for the hard part, I guess this is a little more complicated. Make a new solid. Alright, okay. Go to, you need particular for this, so hopefully you have it. If you don't have it, your motion graphic skills are really limited, because this is an awesome plugin, must have. So now we have to set up our particle emitter. Go to particular, go to emitter, go to set the emitter type to box, and I'm gonna make this just use the size XYZ to make it fill up the screen, so like this. And you also need a little size on the Z value. Just make it something like this, just kind of random values, but just so it fills up the screen. That's the whole point. And now I'm gonna set a keyframe for the particles right at the beginning of the timeline to 100. Now actually just make it 5000 for now. I'm gonna go just one frame forward on the timeline, and I'm gonna set the particles to 0. So now we have this. We just generate particles for one frame and then we stop. So what we're left is just the particles we generated the first frame. And we need, I think we need to change the particle options. Life is good, 3 seconds. Yeah, actually kind of stops, so we need just 3.5, just so it doesn't stop at the end. So it goes throughout the whole timeline. So for the other settings, we're gonna need to up the size of these particles, something like 100. Maybe that's too much. 70 should work for now. Let's see, change the opacity to 6 for now. So we have something like this, starting to look like smoke, like actual smoke, but not yet. We need more particles, so let's add another 0 here, so 50,000. This is how it looks. Maybe this will be enough, we'll see. So next we go to physics. I'm gonna set the gravity to something like negative, I don't know, 100. Maybe it should work, just so they float up. And gonna set the air to, I want them to move from left to right, and so we'll change the wind X value to, let's say, 150 should work. I'm gonna set the preview to have, just so it's a little faster. Maybe this works, looks like it works. But now the particles are leaving the screen, and we want this to remain sort of filled with particles, but we want the motion to be like floating upwards towards right-ish kind of movement, if you understand. So to fix this, the particles leaving the screen, we just have to make the emitter size a little bigger. So something like this, maybe. Let's place it a little more below. So we're changing the position XY, actually the Y value. So we have this sort of thing going on. Actually, that's a little too much gravity. I'm gonna change this to -50 and 250 on the wind X. Yeah, so we have something like this. Looks a little better. Let's change. We need to change the size X of the emitter. So we end up with something like this. I'm not gonna spend too much time on it. I mean, you can use whatever settings work for you. So next step, we're gonna need a little more particles than this. Maybe 75,000. Let's see how this works. Yeah, looks good, good enough. So I set up a sphere feather. I forgot to set this to 100%. It's really important. Size, I think size is good for now. What else do we have here? Forgetting something. Size random. Also this is very important. Something like a value of 60, just to make it a little more random, a little more natural looking. Opacity random is also something you can play with, make it like 50. So we end up with something that looks like this, more or less. It's not that great, but you know, you can mess around with the settings until you get something you want. Now the next step is to set this particular layer. Maybe I should rename. I'm not gonna rename this. So this is the particular layer. Set it to overlay, so it blends in with the rest, and it still has a sort of motion going on, but now it's not visible enough, so we have to change the opacity, bump this up to something like 10, maybe 12. Let's see, this is looking decent enough. It's good enough for me. I'm gonna spend way too much time adjusting these settings. This will work for now. Alright, so the next step, make a new layer, make a new solid, and I'm gonna use generate fill on this. I'm gonna shut it off for now, it doesn't matter. Actually, I'm gonna shut off the layer just so I can make the mask. And basically what I want to do is make a highlight point over here. So basically just a round mask. I'm gonna show you what I mean in just a second. So I'm making a circle mask on the layer we just made. Gonna turn it on. I'm gonna turn the fill back on, and I'm gonna just press F on your keyboard to go to the mask feather options, and I'm gonna use a value of something like 250 for this, should work. And I'm gonna set the transform mode to add, and the color for the fill, I'm gonna use something like an orange-ish kind of color. So basically what this does is just gives us a highlight point, which makes the composition more interesting and just helps the flow. So click the layer and hit Ctrl D to duplicate, and move it to the blue side, and just change the fill color to a bluish sort of value. So this should work. And now I'm gonna use a new layer. Go to layer, new adjustment layer this time, and for the adjustment layer I'm gonna add the color correction, effects color correction tint, and effects color correction curves. Set the tint to the amount to something like 25%, should work, and just add a little contrast on the RGB scale. Just something that works for you, obviously, but something like this. Just make it overall a little more towards the orange side, since it's the dominating color. Now you can just add text to it, you know, something like GFX, GG, whatever, doesn't matter, it's your text. Add a little ramp effect to it. Maybe add a little glow as well. So maybe this might be a little too saturated. I'm gonna make the tint value to 40, and now we can go back at the original layer, just change around, play with the colors, see what works. So maybe more orange, something like that. This is completely up to you, but yeah, you can always go back and change your values until you get something you like. Alright guys, so yeah, this is pretty much what I wanted to show you, how I make my backgrounds in After Effects. So yeah, hope this was useful, and I'll see you next time.